Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Buffy Sainte-Marie? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the controversy, then offer my analysis. Beverly Jean Santamaria was born on February 20, 1941, in Stoneham, Massachusetts. She went by the name Buffy. Her father, Albert, and her mother, Winifred, were both from Wakefield, Massachusetts. Albert was of Italian ancestry, and Winifred was of English ancestry. Due to concerns about anti-Italian feelings in the community, Buffy's family used the last name Sainte-Marie, so Buffy called herself Buffy Sainte-Marie. In the 1960s, Buffy started working as a musician. She performed at various festivals, clubs, concert halls, and other venues. Sometime around 1961, Buffy promoted a false story about her ancestry. She gave inconsistent accounts over the years, but one of her main stories was that she was born on a Cree reserve in Saskatchewan, Canada. She did not know the identity of her biological parents, but she was certain they were of Indigenous Canadian ancestry. Buffy said that Albert and Winifred adopted her, and she grew up in Massachusetts. This is a story that Buffy would maintain for years. Her claim of Indigenous Canadian ancestry was a major part of her identity and her career. In 1964, Buffy visited a Cree reserve in Canada. She was adopted by members of the Piapot First Nation. She claimed that she didn't know if they were her actual biological parents, but they could have been. This same year, her musical career received a boost when she was named Billboard's New Artist of the Year. Buffy ultimately achieved a decent level of success in her musical career. She co-wrote the song Up Where We Belong, which was featured in the 1982 film An Officer and a Gentleman. Some of her success, if not most of it, appeared to be related to her claims about being Indigenous. For example, she won awards which were reserved for Indigenous artists and was often recognized in other ways for this status. Buffy advocated for Indigenous people. She became vocal about various injustices they had endured. Many of her projects were related to this topic. For example, starting in 1975, she made appearances on the television show Sesame Street and talked about Indigenous culture. In one episode, she talked about how some stories about Indigenous people were fairy tales and others were real. She specifically claimed that she was real. Buffy promoted conspiracy theories to explain times when her career wasn't going too well. She claimed that multiple United States presidents were discriminating against her for being an Indigenous Canadian. For example, she claimed that President Lyndon Johnson wrote letters to radio stations praising them for suppressing her music. Now moving to the timeline of the controversy. In October of 2023, the investigative series The Fifth Estate, which airs on CBC television, featured the results from an investigation into Buffy's claims of Indigenous ancestry. They accused her of faking her identity based on evidence which I will review in my analysis. In response, Buffy maintained her story and claimed the allegations against her were deeply hurtful. She said, quote, "I may not know where I was born, but I know who I am," unquote. If Buffy had been faking Indigenous identity this whole time, it appears as though she escaped responsibility. She retired from her work as a musician. Her reputation may be at stake, but probably not her income. Now moving to my analysis. Several people who have looked into Buffy's identity have accused her of faking her Indigenous ancestry, including CBC television, as I mentioned. Buffy and a few supporters claim that these allegations are false. This brings me to the question, is Buffy being deceptive when she claims to be Indigenous? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that Buffy is lying, starting with the inculpatory factors. There are several inconsistencies in Buffy's claims about her Indigenous identity. There should not be any inconsistencies if she was telling the truth. Here are a few examples of her claims throughout the years. When she was a teenager, there is no record of Buffy ever mentioning being Indigenous. In 1961, a newspaper article indicated that Buffy was American Indian. In 1963, there was an article indicating that she was Algonquin Indian. Later that same year, an article referred to her as Mi'kmaq Indian and indicated she was born in Maine. At the end of 1963, she was referred to in a newspaper article as Cree Indian. Buffy claimed that her mother died shortly after giving birth. Later, she said that her real mother was not in a position to keep her, but she always knew who her mother was. Sometime after this, Buffy said that she did not know anything at all. Was Buffy's mother dead or not in a position to keep her? Those two descriptions are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they're typically used that way. Most people would not refer to someone who is dead as not being in a position to do something. Also, did Buffy know who her mother was or not? If she ever knew her mother's identity, wouldn't she always know who she was? Maybe she recorded her mother's identity somewhere and then lost it. I find it curious that Buffy claimed she did not know who her biological parents were, but she was positive they were Indigenous. How would it be possible to know that without knowing their identity? Also, how is this information communicated? Did her parents say to her, "Hey, look, it's important for us to inform you that we are Indigenous. We would also love to tell you our names, but we're kind of in a hurry"? Buffy's birth certificate is stored in Stoneham, Massachusetts. The document was verified as authentic. According to the birth certificate, Buffy was born on February 20, 1941. Albert and Winifred were recorded as Buffy's biological parents, and Buffy's race was identified as white. Buffy claimed that she had no birth certificate and suggested that it could have been destroyed, but clearly she did, and it wasn't. In 1945, Buffy's biological parents purchased a life insurance policy for her. They stated that she was born in Massachusetts. In 1950, on the U.S. Census, Buffy's race was listed as white, and her place of birth was specified as Massachusetts. When Buffy was married in 1982, there was a marriage certificate. The document stated that she was born on February 20, 1941, in Massachusetts. Buffy's signature was on that document. During an interview in 2018, Buffy claimed that she did not know her date of birth. Maybe she stored this information in the same place where she kept her mother's name. Buffy's younger sister allowed her DNA to be tested. It showed that she was genetically related to Buffy's son. There is no way this could be true if Buffy had been adopted. In 1964, Buffy's paternal uncle told a newspaper that Buffy had no Cree heritage. Her brother Alan wrote to newspapers explaining how Buffy was not Indigenous. For example, in 1975, he stated his sister was born to Caucasian parents and, quote, "her Indian background is pure fabrication," unquote. Buffy sent Alan a letter threatening to sue him and to accuse him of offenses of a sexual nature. If Buffy was telling the truth, and Alan had committed these offenses as she alleged, why did she wait until that particular moment to bring it up? One could argue that she made that claim simply to keep her secret. Buffy had a financial incentive to lie about being a member of the Cree Nation. In 1966, there was a newspaper article which indicated that Buffy received $2,000 per performance. Her competitors earned about $150. Moving to the exculpatory factors, Buffy claims that she has Indigenous Canadian ancestry. That's pretty much it for exculpatory factors. When considering the evidence, do I think that Buffy was lying about her heritage? Yes, I believe that she was lying. People who engage in this behavior are sometimes referred to as Pretendians. There have been quite a few of them throughout the years, and some of them were in high-profile positions. I have a video about the notorious Pretendian Sacheen Littlefeather, who died in 2022 after lying to people for decades about her heritage. This brings me to the question, why do people pretend that they have Indigenous identity? Here I'm talking in general, not about this case or any specific case. It is reasonable to believe that the motive for this type of deception is assembled when a person is young. Perhaps their childhood experiences challenged their self-esteem, they didn't receive a lot of praise, and they could not find a way to feel superior. Contemplating their ordinary nature caused them discomfort, and they wanted to find a way to escape that. These individuals tend to be grandiose, have a sense of entitlement, and believe they are special. In their way of thinking, they deserve to be famous and successful, and they should be able to achieve these results without necessarily having talent or working hard. It should be automatic. They simply deserve it based on their incredible and amazing status. Pretendians tend to have a deep level of insecurity, and they are not confident about their abilities. This means that the idea of fairly competing in a marketplace is frightening to them. No matter what their vocation is, they desire to possess an unfair advantage. Often they believe they need and deserve this advantage. I think the idea of fabricating an indigenous ancestry comes from the discrimination that many people in this category endure. Selecting this heritage to impersonate gives the pretendian a sense of security. It's like a safety mechanism. They know that if they fail, they can always blame the failure on discrimination. In this position of relative safety, the pretendian can succeed in their career. They can take chances because they know they always have that safety net. Another benefit from selecting an indigenous identity is the idea of being part of a relatively small group. This strongly appeals to the person's desire to feel special. No matter what happens to them in their career, they will be special. No one can take that away. In a sense, this also operates like a safety mechanism. As far as the logistics of fabricating identity, there was a time in history when record-keeping wasn't the best for indigenous populations. This allows the pretendian to act like records pertaining to their heritage were destroyed or never produced in the first place. In a sense, when looking at all the advantages from the point of view of someone with narcissistic characteristics, it makes sense for them to become a pretendian. In addition to the dynamics I've talked about, I think that fabricating an indigenous heritage could also be tied to the general movement of people redefining long-held social constructs related to identity. Whether right or wrong, in the last few years, there has been a tremendous emphasis placed on people claiming an identity that is not necessarily supported by traditional or scientific definitions. There is the sense that everybody can simply be whatever they want to be. It doesn't matter what the particular dimension happens to be. This ties into the idea that each person can construct their own version of the truth. Curiously, connecting back to Buffy's case, she once said, quote, "I learned early on that what was absolutely true was not necessarily true for me," unquote. This may be a way of rationalizing a lie, like she's not really lying because she has redefined the truth, so what would have been deceptive is now not deceptive. In this sense, someone who reconstructs the truth never has to lie. And if they do, no worries. They can just change the truth again. Now moving to my final thoughts. If Buffy Sainte-Marie has been lying, which I believe is the case, then she wasn't special in the way that she claimed. This should not be a disappointment, however, because Buffy was special in another way. She was a pioneer in the area of redefining reality. She started this in 1961, long before many of her contemporaries. Some may be angry at Buffy for repeatedly being deceptive and not taking responsibility for her behavior, but her behavior aligns with what people can expect in the future. Buffy Sainte-Marie was ahead of her time. Those are my thoughts in the case of Buffy Sainte-Marie. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.